Greetings from the dank basement. In a very philosophical mood, it's time for another episode of You of Pinch, which is Squinty. Hi, I'm Paul Shellbetter, but you knew that because that's the name of my channel. But I'm also called Uncle Squinty by those who either love or despise me. Going to do a pinch of the Sir Walter Scott's Havana Toast. Since I found this tin, and again, this tin is at least 5 years old, I think. But it's still just wonderful. Perfect to sniff. I got my apple seed size pinch. You ready? Let's pinch something. And then we'll get philosophical. Perfect. So, another hit of coffee. And I got to show you this. Let's see if any of you remember this. Now, I'm not going to be, I'm sure, not holding it up correctly. But I'll flip it around, and maybe you'll be able to see it. You know what these are? These are Sony MiniDiscs. Do you remember mini-disc recorders? They were my go-to for a few years. I thought it was pretty convenient. The recorders were small, shirt pocket sized, and with a pair of good quality German condenser microphones mounted to the temples of my glasses, I could discreetly record everywhere, and did. But that technology is now nearly 20 years old. And we've moved on, right? And that got me to thinking about changes in society, changes in technology. Scope this. It's 1964, and I am in second grade. And I'm living with my grandma because my mom has two little kids in the house, my two younger brothers. So my grandma picked up part of the load, and I got to live with her. And every morning, I would have my Cheerios, or whatever, watching morning cartoons. And one of the cartoons was Dick Tracy. And in Dick Tracy, he had a wristwatch that he called a wrist radio, and he looked at it and you could see the face of the person he was talking to. That's 1964. Fast forward about 50 years, 60 years, and suddenly there's the Apple Watch, the Google Watch, and we can actually see the face of the person we're talking to on the face of the watch. Star Trek, the communicators. That's a Motorola flip phone. A flip smartphone, latter generation of the Motorola flip phone. And they can talk, see the face of the person they're talking to, the communicator. And all of that stuff has come true. I read, actually there's a wonderful radio series called X-1 from the 1950s, I'm guessing. It was, the stories were often written by top-notch science fiction writers of the time. And it was produced, I believe, on NBC as a radio drama. And one of the episodes from the early 1950s is called A Logic Called Joe. Everybody wanted a Logic. If you had a Logic, you had the library right there. And it would come up on the screen, and you could read the library. And you could talk to your friends with video and everything. And you could send mail with it. 1952 to the PCs starting in the 1990s. So there you have it. Technology keeps rolling on, some of it predicted, but it's coming fast. It's coming really fast. We have social media. We have to keep up with the Joneses on social media. If we're into that sort of thing, we might be trolls causing trouble just for the sheer joy of the rancor. In many ways, the technology that we have now has sort of messed us up, I think, as a society. And I think a lot of people feel that way. If nothing else, the learning curve for all the new information is ridiculous, and the new technology as well. Information overload, mis- and disinformation, depending on your definitions and who the information is coming from. So much stuff being thrown at us 24/7. And I think, here comes the philosophy. You ready? I think that's a reason I'm very much attracted to the use of tobacco. European cultures have used tobacco for well over 500 years. The very first tobacco introduced to Europe was probably nasal snuff. And of course, indigenous people in the Western Hemisphere had been using tobacco for centuries, millennia before that. So, tobacco is an old custom. Now, please don't misunderstand me. While I find the use of tobacco to be comforting and a touchstone with which I can remember and embrace the good stuff about our past as a human race, if you do not currently use tobacco, please don't start. Nicotine is purported to be addictive, and the reason I say purported is there's limited research that shows it to be physiologically addictive, but it is certainly psychologically addictive, and you don't need another bad habit. And although nasal snuff is inexpensive on a per gram basis, per use basis, certainly, I just don't think you need to get another bad habit, right? I mean, face it, you've got enough already. And if you ask me what bad habit you already have, I'll just have to shrug and say, beats me. So anyway, getting back to the philosophy, we've gone from, like I said, the phonograph, well, before that, music boxes, and later player pianos, and after that, Victrolas. The hand crank, not amplified except by natural physics, with a great big trumpet horn to magnify the vibrations coming through the needle and down the tone arm. To modern turntables, then we went to something called 8-track tapes, and from 8 tracks to cassettes, and from cassettes to CDs, and from CDs to digital distribution, and from digital music right back to the phonograph. But it changes so fast. And I think a lot of us love the touchstone that tobacco can be. Tobacco allows us to take a minute to reflect, even if it's just a pinch of snuff, to think. I want to meet all of my subscribers someday face to face. It's a dream of mine. All 2,710 of you, thank you. My subscriptions have gone up by 20 since the last upload, I think. So that's great. But I'd love to meet with all of you, but there is one person in particular that I would like to meet before I die, or before they die. And that would be Gretchen Thunberg. Gretchen, if the story is true, has a very cool parlor, the kind of a chill spot, relaxation spot, warmed by a hearth, burns a little wood to stay warm, lit by oil lamps, an old-fashioned Victrola from the turn of the last century on which he plays records that were made of records that were actually made of wax with a steel core. The old 78 RPM records is what they became. He plays harpsichord. He plays bassoon. His house, as he describes it, should I use the gender-neutral pronoun? Gretchen, I don't know. The way he describes it is his house is lace in all directions, and he even serves Coca-Cola in antique cut crystal glasses. What I think Gretchen is doing is maintaining contact with a simpler, ostensibly, physically more challenging, don't get me wrong. A lot of people got a lot sicker. You would have to get up in the middle of the night to stoke your fire to stay warm, even into the 40s, when you had a coal furnace, the 1940s. But it's a simpler time emotionally and mentally in many ways, I think. There was not the information overload. And I admire somebody that understands the useful connections to the past that we should all maintain. You see, I believe that people were a lot more courteous in general 150 years ago or 120 years ago. I think in general the pace of life was slower. I think in general life was more comprehensible. Right now, the learning curve, just for the technology, not to mention changes in society, is incredibly steep. And so we go back to something we understand. Smoking a pipe, taking a pinch of snuff. Cheers. Well, I think that's enough philosophy for today. Again, if you do not currently use tobacco, please don't start. You don't need another bad habit. These videos are made for viewing by adults. If you are under the age of 18, take everything I say with a grain of salt and do not let me be yet another bad example for you. All right? Remember, contest drawing coming up on Friday night. And check out the latest Pinchia. These are jokes that you would not be able to tell at the workplace. They are generally offensive by design. I want to crack your carapace with these jokes a little bit. I want to pick you a little bit with this. Because if we cannot laugh at the monster, it will eat us. Just a last tidbit of philosophy for you. From the Dank Basement, Paul Schallbetter. May the divine bless you in everything you do today and all through the rest of this week. Understand that I appreciate you and that your participation is my compensation. Thanks.